Tom had always been a careful man when it came to his household expenses. He wasn't stingy, but he liked things to be in order. He knew how much water, gas, and electricity his house usually used every month. He'd been living in the same place for 6 years, and everything was predictable. He even had a habit of comparing the new bill to last year's bill for the same month, just to make sure nothing was out of the ordinary. But for the past 2 months, something was definitely wrong. The first time it happened, Tom opened his electric bill one morning while drinking coffee. He almost spilled his cup when he saw the total. It was nearly double his usual amount. He frowned, thinking maybe the power company had made a mistake. He checked the reading date, the usage chart, and even the little graph they print on the side of the bill. Everything seemed correct except the numbers. The usage was way higher than it should have been. At first, he brushed it off. It was summer after all. Maybe the air conditioner had been running more than usual. Or maybe one of his appliances was getting old and drawing more power. He even joked to himself, "The fridge is working overtime just to keep up with all the cold beers I've been putting in there." But the next month, the bill came again, and it was even higher. This time, he knew something was wrong. Tom decided to play detective. He started by unplugging anything he didn't use often. The old toaster, the spare bedroom's lamp even, the charger for his electric drill. He switched off the lights more carefully, made sure the TV wasn't left on in the background, and even started using a fan instead of the AC at night. Still, by the end of the month, the bill shot up like a rocket. One Saturday evening, while watering his front yard, Tom noticed something strange. His outdoor electrical outlet, the one near the side fence, had a faint scuff mark around it, almost like it had been used a lot recently. That was odd, because Tom barely ever used that outlet. It was mainly there for convenience, like plugging in Christmas lights during the holiday season. He crouched down to take a closer look. The little plastic cover was slightly loose, and when he opened it, he saw faint scratches on the inside, like a plug had been inserted over and over again. He didn't think much of it at first, but the thought stayed in his head all evening. Later that night, while taking his Labrador Max for a short walk before bed, Tom passed by his own driveway and caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his eye. Stopped, squinted into the darkness, and realized he could see a faint, thin cord stretching from his outdoor socket to somewhere beyond the fence. Curious. He walked closer, quietly so as not to spook whoever or whatever was out there. The cord went under the wooden slats of the fence and into his neighbor's driveway. And there it was, gleaming under the dim streetlight, Karen's brand new Tesla Model Y. The charging port was open, cord connected, and the little green light on the car was pulsing gently, showing it was charging. Tom's jaw tightened. Karen was his next-door neighbor, and everyone in the neighborhood knew she could be difficult. She was on the HOA board, always complaining about people's lawn heights, paint colors, or trash bins being out too long, but stealing electricity. That was a new one. He stood there for a moment, staring at the absurd sight. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. No attempt to run the cord discreetly, no asking permission, nothing. It was as if she felt completely entitled to use his electricity, as if his house was some kind of public charging station for her convenience. Tom could feel his irritation rising. Yes. But a part of him was almost impressed by the audacity. Does that? And not just once? Judging by his bills, she had probably been doing it regularly, maybe even daily. The Tesla battery was huge, and charging it from empty could take hours and pull a massive amount of power. That explained his bills shooting through the roof max. His dog gave a soft bark, and Tom realized he'd been standing there too long. He gave the cord one last look, shaking his head, and went back inside. He didn't unplug it, not yet. He wanted to think before he acted. Lying in bed later, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the image of the cord snaking from his house to hers, like some kind of silent power siphon. He thought about the last few HOA meetings where Gran had lectured everyone about being good neighbors and community-minded. The hypocrisy made his blood boil. She was literally stealing from him, while preaching about fairness. Over the next few days, Tom kept an eye on the outlet. Sure enough, almost every evening, around 8 or 9 p.m., he'd see that cord appear again. stretching across the fence like some lazy spider's web. Karen wasn't even subtle. She'd just walk over in broad daylight or early evening, plug it in, and leave it charging overnight. Tom started wondering how long she'd been doing this before he noticed. Maybe 3 months? 6? Longer? Remembered how she'd casually mentioned at a barbecue last year that she'd gotten tired of paying for her own charging at public stations. At the time, he thought it was just a passing comment. Now he realized she might have been hinting at her little arrangement with his outlet. The worst part wasn't even the money, though that annoyed him plenty. It was the arrogance. She'd asked he might have agreed to let her charge once or twice in an emergency, but this wasn't that. This was deliberate, repeated theft, done with the confidence of someone who thought they'd never be called out. One evening, Tom decided to test something. He went outside around 10 p.m., just to check the garden hose at least. That's what he told himself. Sure enough, the cord was there again. This time he gently touched the plug and felt the faint warmth of electricity flowing through it. He even heard the soft hum from the Tesla's onboard charger. It was like a tiny, quiet reminder that his power was being drained without his consent. That night, as Tom lay in bed, he decided this wasn't something he could ignore. The problem was he knew exactly how the HOA worked, and with Karen on the board, complaining through official channels would go nowhere. In fact, she might even twist it around to make him look unreasonable. She had a way of doing that. Tom realized he'd need a plan. But before that, he wanted to be absolutely sure. Over the next week, he quietly took photos from his upstairs window, each one showing the cord connected from his house to her Tesla. He made sure the timestamps were clear. He even took a short video one night, zooming in to show the green charging light on her car. By the end of the week, he had enough evidence to prove what she was doing beyond any doubt. Still, didn't rush to confront her. Instead, he found himself watching her behavior more closely. She acted completely normal, waving politely in the mornings, walking her little Pomeranian like nothing was happening. It was almost surreal. It's like she had two personalities, the public face of a concerned HOA member and the secret thief draining his power every night. One Friday night, Tom stood at his window, looking down at the cord once again. He thought about all the times she'd scolded people for small infractions, a neighbor's lawn being too long, someone leaving a garbage bin visible from the street, a kid's basketball hoop on the sidewalk. She had always been so quick to enforce rules when it suited her. But apparently, those same rules didn't apply to her when she wanted something. It was in that moment, staring at the glowing green light on her Tesla, that Tom decided this wasn't just going to be about stopping her. It was going to be about teaching her a lesson she wouldn't forget. The next morning, Tom woke up with a clear plan in mind. He decided he wasn't going to sneak around anymore, wondering if he should say something. He was going to confront Karen directly, face to face, and see what she had to say for herself. If nothing else, he wanted to hear her explanation, though he already suspected it wouldn't be a good one. He spent the early hours pacing around the kitchen, drinking his coffee, rehearsing what he would say. He told himself to stay calm. Getting angry right away wouldn't help. It would just give her a chance to play the victim, which she was very good at. No, he'd be polite, factual, and direct. He'd ask why she was using his electricity without permission, and maybe she'd apologize. After breakfast, he walked over to her house. It was a sunny day, quiet in the neighborhood except for the occasional bird chirping. He rang her doorbell and waited. A few moments later, Karen opened the door. She was wearing her usual casual but put-together outfit, yoga pants, a light sweater, and oversized sunglasses perched on top of her head. She smiled like she had been expecting a friendly chat. "Morning, Tom," she said, her voice warm but a little too casual. "Morning, Karen," Tom replied, keeping his tone even. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've noticed lately." Her smile didn't fade, but there was a slight narrowing of her eyes, like she was already on guard. "Oh, what's up?" Well, Tom began. "I've noticed you've been plugging your Tesla into my outdoor outlet." For a split second, there was silence. Most people, when confronted like that, would look shocked or embarrassed, but not Karen. Instead, she gave a little laugh, not a nervous laugh. but the kind of laugh someone gives when they think the other person is making a big deal out of nothing. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Yeah, but been doing that sometimes? My home charger's been acting up, and it's just easier to use yours. You don't mind, do you?" Tom's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Actually, I do mind. My electricity bill has gone way up the past couple of months. Charging. A Tesla pulls a lot of power, and she'll cut him off with another wave of her hand. Tom, it's just a little electricity. It's not like I'm draining your bank account. And besides, as a member of the HOA board, I like to think we all share resources here in the community. It's part of being neighborly." Tom stared at her, almost not believing what he was hearing. Sharing resources was one thing, borrowing a cup of sugar. Maybe, but using someone's private outlet to charge an electric car for hours every night? That wasn't sharing. That was stealing, Karen, he said, still trying to keep his voice steady. "You didn't ask. You just started doing it. And now my bills are through the roof." She shrugged, completely unbothered. "Tom, you're overreacting. I mean, come on, you can afford it. And it's for a good cause. Electric cars help the environment. We all need to do our part, right? Think of it as your contribution too. Saving the planet." That was it. That was the moment Tom realized this conversation wasn't going to go anywhere productive. She wasn't apologizing, she wasn't offering to pay for the extra cost, and she definitely wasn't planning to. Stop. She had completely twisted the situation so that she was the one doing something noble, and he was the one being selfish. "I'm asking you to stop," Tom said firmly. "Today, no more using my outlet without my permission." She smirked, tilting her head slightly. "Well, I'll think about it. But honestly, Tom, you're making a mountain out of a molehill." The HOA would tell you the same. That last line was a warning, and Tom knew it. She was basically saying that if he took this to the HOA, she'd use her position on the board to shut him down. And knowing how much influence she had over some of the other members, she might even make him look like the bad guy. Tom stood there for a moment, biting back the words he wanted to say. He could feel his temper rising, but he didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose it. Finally, he just nodded once and said, "All right, I've made my position clear." He turned and walked away, feeling her eyes on his back. He could almost hear the smugness in her silence. Back in his kitchen, Tom leaned against the counter and exhaled slowly. He'd gone in hoping she might admit she was wrong, maybe even offer to pay part of the bill. Instead, she doubled down, acting like she had every right to use his electricity because of her HOA position. That afternoon, Tom decided to test how far her arrogance would go. He sat by his front window with a cup of tea, watching the driveway. Sure enough, around 8:15 that evening, Karen came walking over. She didn't even glance at his house, just plugged her cord into the outlet like she was entitled to it. She didn't hesitate, didn't check if anyone was watching. She just connected the car and strolled back to her house. Tom sipped his tea, shaking his head. Any other person, after being confronted, would have at least paused, maybe tried to hide what they were doing. Not Karen. She was confident nothing would happen to her. The next day, Tom decided to at least try the HOA route, though he knew it would be a waste of time. He emailed the board with a polite but firm message explaining the situation. He even attached the photos he'd taken, showing the cord plugged into his outlet and leading straight to Karen's Tesla. He didn't ask for punishment, just that the board tell her to stop. He got a reply later that evening from the HOA president, a man named Greg, who had always seemed friendly enough, but the email was short and unhelpful. "Hi, Tom. We've discussed your concern and believe this is a minor matter between neighbors. We encourage you to resolve it directly with Karen. Charging a vehicle occasionally shouldn't cause significant hardship, and as part of our community spirit, we hope you can be accommodating." "Thanks, Greg." Tom almost laughed when he read it. Occasionally, she was charging every night. Community spirit sounded a lot like, "We're not going to do anything because she's on the board." The message was clear. The HOA wasn't going to help him. Karen had free rein to do whatever she wanted, and if he didn't like it, too bad that evening. When Tom saw the cord appear again, he felt a different kind of anger, the quiet, steady kind that doesn't fade. Quickly, this wasn't just about the electricity anymore. It was about the principle, about not letting someone walk all over him just because they thought they could get away with it. He didn't go outside. He didn't yell. Just sat there in his living room, watching the little green light on her Tesla blink in the distance. And as he watched, a plan began to form in his mind. A plan that would make sure Karen thought twice before plugging into someone else's outlet ever again. Tom knew one thing for sure. Talking to Karen was a waste of time. She had made it clear she didn't care what he thought, and the HOA had just confirmed that they weren't going to step in. That meant, if he wanted this to stop, he would have to take matters into his own hands. The thought of just unplugging her car every time crossed his mind. It would have been simple. Just pull the cord out and let her find it. But Tom knew Karen's type. She'd probably accuse him of damaging her property, or worse, she'd start some ridiculous feud and involve the HOA again. No, he needed something smarter. Something she couldn't trace back to him. He spent the next few evenings doing research on his laptop. He learned everything he could about Tesla charging systems, outdoor power outlets, and ways to protect or end this. K's. Overprotect a home electrical supply. He wasn't looking to cause serious harm. It's just enough of an electrical hiccup to make her think twice. That's when he came across a small device called a power surge protector, the kind electricians sometimes use during maintenance. But the model he found had a twist. It wasn't the regular kind you put on a power strip for your computer. This one was industrial grade. It's designed to send a short but powerful surge of electricity through a line to trip sensitive circuits. It wouldn't burn the outlet or the wiring in his house. It would overload something fragile like a Tesla's charging system. The more he read, the more he realized it could work perfectly. The device wasn't illegal to own. In fact, electricians used it all the time. The trick was in how it was applied. If he wired it into his garage's power line, connected to the same circuit as the outdoor outlet, he could trigger it whenever. He wanted it would send a quick jolt through the line, just enough to confuse or damage anything too sensitive. Tom leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. It wasn't revenge for the sake of being cruel. It was a lesson. It would be one that Karen would feel where it hurt most, her expensive Tesla. The next day, Tom went to the hardware store. He bought the surge device, some wiring, a motion sensor, and a small control box. To anyone else, it would look like he was just doing some regular electrical work. He even chatted with the store clerk about upgrading his outlet safety, which wasn't a lie, at least not entirely. Back home, he pulled on his old work gloves and got to work in the garage. It took him most of the afternoon to set everything up. First, he cut the power to the circuit that fed the outdoor outlet. Then, he wired the surge device into the line inside his garage, making sure it was hidden behind a false panel. From there, he connected it to the control box, which he could switch on manually or set to trigger with the motion sensor. The motion sensor was the clever part. He mounted it discreetly on the fence post, angled toward the outdoor outlet. That way, if someone walked up to plug something in, the sensor would detect movement and start a short countdown. After a set time, say 10 minutes, the surge would activate automatically. It would give Karen enough time to plug in and walk away before the jolt hit, as Tom tightened the last screws. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. It wasn't the kind of thing he normally did. He was a quiet, reasonable guy. But something about Karen's smugness, the way she had brushed him off, and the fact that the HOA had protected her instead of him, it had pushed him past the point of being nice. When everything was installed, he tested it on a few small appliances inside his garage. The surge was quick, just a sharp click from the device followed by the sound of the test appliance shutting off. Didn't blow fuses or leave burn marks, just overloaded the device for a second. Perfect. That night, Tom sat by his window, the control box on the table beside him. Part of him hoped she wouldn't come over, that maybe she had finally taken his warning seriously, but deep down he knew Karen wouldn't stop. Sure enough, around 8:30 p.m. he saw her porch light flick on. A minute later, she walked out, dragging her charging cord casually in one hand. She didn't even glance toward his window. She just walked over, plugged in her Tesla like she was plugging in her phone, and went back to her house without a care in the world Tom glanced at the motion sensor indicator. It had detected her movement perfectly. The countdown had already started. 10 minutes. He watched the seconds tick by, his heart beating a little faster than usual. It wasn't that he was afraid of being caught. Everything was on his property, and she had no permission to be there in the first place. Still, there was something thrilling about knowing what was about to happen. When the timer reached 0, the control box gave a faint click. Out in the driveway, there was no loud explosion, no dramatic shower of sparks. Just a subtle flicker of the Tesla's headlights and a change in the sound coming from the charging port. The little green charging light turned red for a moment, then went dark. A few seconds later, it started blinking a warning pattern. Tom leaned forward, trying not to grin too widely. From this distance, it was hard to tell exactly what damage had been done. But he knew enough about EV systems to guess that the surge had tripped something expensive. A few minutes later, he saw Karen come outside again. She was wearing slippers and looked annoyed. She bent over the charging port, pressing buttons on the screen near the cable. The warning light kept flashing. She unplugged the cord, waited, then plugged it back in. For a moment, the green light came back on, but then it flickered and went out again, even from inside his house. Tom could hear her mutter something under her breath. She yanked the cord out harder this time and stomped back toward her house. Tom sat back, feeling a wave of satisfaction wash over him. The trap had worked perfectly, and best of all, she had no idea it had been intentional. To her, it probably just seemed like some freak electrical fault. The next day, Tom went about his usual routine, mowing the lawn and fixing a loose gutter on his porch. Around mid-morning, he saw Karen in her driveway talking on her phone with a frustrated tone. She kept gesturing toward her Tesla and shaking her head. Later, when she drove off, Tom noticed she didn't plug in the car that night. Maybe she thought the problem was with his outlet. Maybe she was planning to get it checked before trying again. Either way, Tom knew this wasn't over. People like Karen didn't back down easily. If she thought the outlet was fixed, she'd probably try again. And when she did, the trap would still be waiting. That evening, Tom poured himself a glass of wine and sat on his porch, feeling a rare sense of control. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't just the guy watching his bills climb higher while his neighbor helped herself to his electricity. He was the one with the upper hand, and he intended to keep it that way. A full week went by, and Tom's outdoor outlet sat untouched. Every night, he would glance out the window, expecting to see that familiar black cord stretching from his fence to Karen's shiny Tesla. But nothing. She didn't come over, didn't even linger near his property. For a while, Tom thought maybe she had learned her lesson after the first surge. Maybe the sudden failure of her car's charging system had scared her enough to keep her away. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to give up on the 8th night. Just as Tom was settling into his armchair with a book, he caught movement in the corner of his eye. He turned his head toward the window, and there it was, the unmistakable silhouette of Karen walking across her driveway, cord in hand, moving with that same casual confidence she always had. She didn't look around, didn't check to see if anyone was watching. She simply walked right over to his outlet, bent down, plugged it in. Tom could almost imagine the smug thought running through her mind. She probably believed whatever had gone wrong before was just a random technical glitch. Maybe she had taken the car to a Tesla service center, gotten the port reset, and now she thought she was in the clear. Inside his garage, the motion sensor picked her up instantly. The small indicator light on Tom's control box blinked, letting him know the countdown had started. 10 minutes. Tom didn't move right away. He just sat there watching the green charging light on her Tesla glow faintly from across the fence. It pulsed slowly, like the car was peacefully sipping energy. His energy. For a moment, Tom almost laughed at how predictable she was. The first surge hadn't taught her enough of a lesson. But tonight, she was about to get the full effect. The countdown ticked away, and Tom felt his heart rate pick up just a little. He wasn't nervous about being caught. He had thought through every angle. But there was still a rush to knowing exactly what was about to happen, while the other person had no clue. 9 minutes. 9.5. Then the timer hit. 0. Inside the garage, there was the faintest click as the surge device activated. From Tom's window, he saw it happen instantly. The green charging light on the Tesla flickered violently, turning yellow, then flashing red. The headlights pulsed once, almost like the car had flinched. A split second later, there was a sharp pop sound, followed by a brief hiss, the unmistakable sound of an electrical system tripping hard. Karen, who had been walking back toward her front door, froze mid-step. She turned around quickly, her brow furrowing. She marched back to the car, crouched near the charging port, and tapped the small touchscreen next to it. The car gave her a warning message. Tom couldn't hear it, but he could see the frustration in her movements. She unplugged the cord and plugged it back in, waiting nothing. The warning light stayed red. The car's charging system was completely unresponsive. She tried again. Same result. Tom, still watching from his window, noticed something else. This time, the surge had clearly done more damage than before. The Tesla's dashboard screen, visible through the windshield, flickered, faintly, like it was struggling to stay on. That wasn't just a tripped safety. Something deeper had fried. Karen muttered something sharp, yanked the cord out entirely, and stomped toward her front door. But halfway there, she stopped again, turned around, and glared directly at Tom's house. Not his window, his house. She couldn't see him behind the curtains, but her posture said it all. She was suspicious now. Tom didn't move. He just stayed seated, calm and still, sipping the last of his coffee as she finally went inside. For the rest of the night, Tom noticed her lights coming on and off. He guessed she was probably on the phone with Tesla support, maybe even looking up troubleshooting forums. But there was no quick fix for what had just happened. The damage from a sudden heavy surge wasn't the kind of thing you reset with a button. It would mean expensive parts, maybe even replacing the entire onboard charging module. The next morning, Tom went out to water his lawn like nothing had happened. Karen's Tesla sat in her driveway, its charging port closed, looking as sleek and smug as always, except Tom knew it was basically a very expensive brick until she got it fixed. Around mid-morning, Karen came outside, clearly in a hurry. She got into the Tesla, pressed the start button, and nothing happened. Tom tried to hide his satisfaction, but he couldn't help noticing her frantic movements inside the car. A few minutes later, she got out and slammed the door harder than necessary. By early afternoon, a flatbed tow truck rolled into the neighborhood. 2 men got out, and after a short conversation with Karen, they began carefully loading the Tesla onto the truck. Tom watched from his porch as Karen stood there with her arms crossed, looking frustrated and embarrassed. She didn't look toward his house once. When the truck drove away, Tom felt a deep sense of victory. Not the kind that comes from petty revenge, but the kind that comes from finally standing up to someone who had been walking all over you. She had stolen his electricity for weeks, brushed him off when he confronted her, and even used her HOA status to protect herself. Now, her arrogance had cost her something far more valuable than what she'd stolen from him that evening. Tom sat outside on his porch, enjoying the quiet. For the first time in a long while, there was no cord stretched across his fence. No. Soft, green glow from the neighbor's driveway. It's the peaceful sound of crickets and the faint hum of the streetlights. Karen didn't come over that night, or the next, and Tom suspected she wouldn't be plugging into his outlet again, so anytime soon. What made the victory even sweeter was the fact that she had no proof. Even if she suspected him, what could she say? She had been on his property without permission. If she admitted that, she'd be admitting to theft. And without evidence, it was just an unfortunate mystery electrical problem that had cost her thousands. Tom knew she'd probably try to act normal around him in the coming weeks, maybe even attempt small talk like nothing had happened. But the unspoken truth would always be there. She knew. He knew. And now, every time she looked at his house, she'd be reminded that sometimes karma doesn't just wait around. Sometimes it arrives with a sharp little click and a very expensive repair bill. The morning after the tow truck took Karen's Tesla away, the neighborhood felt strangely quiet. Tom noticed it the moment he stepped outside to collect his newspaper. Normally, Karen's car was parked in her driveway like a shiny trophy. Something. She clearly loved showing off. Her driveway looked almost bare, and for some reason, it made the whole street feel calmer. Tom watered his plants, humming to himself. He didn't expect to hear from Karen again, not directly. In his mind, the matter was over. She'd gotten what was coming to her. She couldn't say a word without admitting she had been stealing from him. But Karen wasn't the type to let something go quietly around mid-morning. Tom was in his kitchen making tea when he heard loud, rapid knocks on his front door. He sighed, set the kettle down, and walked over. Through the small glass panel, he saw Karen standing there, her arms crossed tightly, sunglasses hiding her eyes even though it wasn't that sunny. When he opened the door, she didn't waste time. "Tom," she began, her tone sharp, "we need to talk." Tom leaned casually against the doorframe. "Morning, Karen. What about?" Her lips tightened. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what happened to my car." Tom tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled. "Your car?" "Oh, you mean the Tesla? I saw it got towed. That's too bad. What happened?" She stepped a little closer. "What happened is that your outlet fried my charging system. The repairs are going to cost thousands, and I think you know why that happened?" Tom gave her a calm, even look. "Karen, you were using my outlet without permission. You've been doing it for weeks. If something went wrong while you were trespassing, that's not on me." Her jaw dropped slightly, and for a second, she looked like she might shout, but instead, she straightened up and crossed her arms tighter. "The HOA is going to hear about this. I'll make sure they deal with you." Tom smiled faintly. "Feel free to tell them, but you might want to think about what you'll have to admit in the process. You'll be telling the entire board that you were on my property, using my electricity, without asking." For the first time in the conversation, Karen didn't have a quick reply. She just glared at him for a moment, then turned and stormed back to her house. Tom closed the door and went back to his tea, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He knew Karen's type. She thrived on control, and right now, she had none. 2 days later, an email went out from the HOA announcing an urgent meeting about recent disputes between neighbors. Tom knew exactly what that meant. The meeting was held in the small community hall at the end of the street. Tom arrived a few minutes early, taking a seat near the middle. Neighbors slowly trickled in, chatting quietly. He noticed more than a few of them glancing toward Karen, who was sitting near the front, her posture stiff and defensive. When the meeting started, Greg, the HOA president, cleared his throat and said, "We're here to discuss a situation between two residents. Karen, you requested this meeting. You have the floor." Karen stood, smoothing her sweater, and turned to face the room. "Thank you, Greg. As many of you know, I've always tried to promote cooperation and sharing in this neighborhood. Recently, however, I've been the victim of a malicious act that damaged my property. I believe one of our members intentionally caused electrical damage to my vehicle." The room was silent for a moment, then a few people exchanged puzzled looks. Tom stayed quiet. Waiting, Karen continued. "I was charging my car from an outdoor outlet, something I've done occasionally when my own charger wasn't working. Suddenly, my vehicle suffered catastrophic electrical damage. I believe this was done intentionally." Greg looked uneasy. "Karen, did you have permission to use this outlet?" Karen hesitated, then said, "It was a neighborly arrangement." "I assumed it was fine." Tom raised his hand slightly. "Greg, if I may?" Greg nodded. Tom stood slowly, facing the room. "There was no arrangement. Karen has been using my outdoor outlet without my permission for weeks. I confronted her about it directly. She refused to stop. I took the matter to the HOA, and I was told to handle it between us. I did not damage her vehicle, but if something happened while she was using my property without consent, that's on her," several neighbors murmured in agreement. One man in the back called out, "She's been doing the same thing to me, plugging into my outlet when I'm not home." Another woman spoke up, and she told my husband it was community sharing. We thought it was strange. Karen's face turned bright red. "That's not true." I was, but Greg raised a hand. "Karen, if multiple neighbors are saying you've been using their electricity without asking, that's a serious problem. And if that's the case, you don't have a claim against Tom. In fact, he glanced around the room. Does anyone else here have concerns about this behavior? Hands went up around the room, more than Tom expected, apparently Karen's. Sharing extended beyond just his property. In the end, the board decided there would be no action against Tom. Instead, they issued Karen a formal warning for violating property boundaries. The motion passed easily, and the meeting moved on to other business. As the room began to clear, several neighbors came up to Tom, quietly thanking him for speaking up. One older couple even laughed and said, "We've been putting padlocks on our outlets because of her. Glad someone finally called her out." Karen left without saying another word, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she walked out. In the weeks that followed, things in the neighborhood felt noticeably different. Karen kept to herself more, no longer strutting around as the self-appointed enforcer of HOA rules, where Tesla eventually returned, looking as shiny as ever. But Tom never once saw it plugged into his outlet or anyone else's. Tom's electricity bill returned to its normal level. He opened it. He felt a little wave of victory, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had stood his ground and won, one evening. As the sun was setting, Tom sat on his porch with Max at his feet. The street was peaceful. Kids were riding bikes, and neighbors were chatting in driveways. Across the way, Karen was unloading groceries from her car. She glanced in his direction for a brief moment, then looked away quickly. Tom didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't say a word. He didn't need to. She knew he knew, and that was enough.